This is the Amazon rainforest from the sky. This is life. The Amazon is the world's largest and most biodiverse rainforest on our planet. It holds a third of the biodiversity of a plant and animal species, and also a third of the flowing fresh water on our planet. The world's largest tropical rainforest, the world's largest river. But this river is even bigger in the sky. It's called the Flying River. This was me just a few weeks ago in reverence of one of the tallest trees of the Amazon, the kapok tree. You may have heard. Samauma in Brazil, they say. The kapok. It is a massive tree that produces little seeds that have cotton inside. These little seeds spread and they produce these massive giants. And every time I'm near them, I'm just so happy. And I could feel the spirit of the forest. The Quechua people, when I was in my 20s, when I first traveled to the Amazon, they always said, be careful, walk quietly by these trees. You don't want to wake up the duendes, the little spirits. They would say the dwarfs, but I'm like, are they really dwarfs? Or I've later learned to understand they're beings. They're beings, which they say are beings that are alive in the forest. All of the trees, all of the plants, all of the rocks, all of the insects are beings, but they're also beings that we can't see, as Christiana was mentioning. There's networks of mycelium under the forest that we can't see, but they are there. Today, I want to talk about love. I want to talk about the heart, because the Amazon is not only the lungs of the earth. The Amazon is the heart of the earth. It is the earth's heart pump. It goes back to what I said before. The Amazon is the world's largest tropical rainforest and river, but above the Amazon, there is a river 3 times larger. It is called the Flying Rivers. This is all those giant kapok trees, all of the trees in the forest lift up the transpiration, and they form the rain clouds. Those rain clouds then create the rain. Those rain clouds travel across South America. They irrigate the continent. They travel north up to the Sierras, up to the Rocky Mountains. They give us rain. They give us snow. We are interconnected with the Amazon rainforest. We are interdependent. We are interconnected. These words that you see here are our pillars. If you look at Amazon Watch's website, you're going to see campaigns. You're going to see what we're working to stop. End Amazon crude. Stop mining in the Amazon. Defend the defenders. Stop organized crime. And just literally about a year ago, I told our team, I would like us to talk about what we're for, not only what we're against, not only what we are trying to stop. We are working to end Amazon crude. We are working to stop the shipments of oil extracted on indigenous lands from coming to California. We are the biggest importers of crude from the Amazon here in California. And then we export more oil from California than Saudi Arabia. That's another topic. But I told our team, I said, I don't feel that we're doing justice to our work when we only talk about what we're against. I want to talk about what we're for. And we did some exercises with one of our board members, Fabiana Rodriguez, and she led us through many different exercises about to look at the antithesis of what we say, on our website or in some of our communications. And these are the words that came up. And so hopefully you will be seeing more of this language in our work. And I think it's not a coincidence that during this time of so much hate and fear and resistance, that we need to be showing up with solidarity. We need to be honoring Indigenous wisdom. We need to be creating our mycelia and remembering that we're interconnected and that we're interdependent, that we seek justice, that we're going to fight for justice, that we still have hope amidst the darkness, and that we must reforest hearts and minds to protect the Amazon, to protect nature, to protect our rights. At the heart of all of these words is love. When it really comes down to it, it's all about love. So I'm going to invite you all. You can close your eyes if you want. That was the sound of us paddling in flooded forest in the Tapajós River, one of the largest tributaries of the Amazon in Brazil. I call it the Caribbean of the Amazon because it is so beautiful, so blue, and white sand beaches. And it is protected by the Munduruku people. They're people that we work with across the Amazon in Brazil who are working to protect their rivers, their rights in their rainforests from mining, from agribusiness, from large dams, and from illegal land grabbing, from literally the taking of their land by cattle ranchers or by loggers. This is another image of flooded forest. The Amazon rainforest is not one ecosystem. It is many ecosystems within an ecosystem, within the basin. You may have heard of the sacred headwaters, the beginning of the Amazon in Ecuador, Peru, Colombia. And then in the basin in Brazil, we see varying ranges of rivers that flood and fall depending on the time of year. This is a Rio Piatu. I was just there a few weeks ago. This river actually has gained the right of a river because the rights of nature is in the Constitution of Ecuador. As I was mentioning, the Amazon rainforest, from the smallest insect to the tallest tree, is life. For decades, I've worked with communities, indigenous peoples across the Amazon rainforest who have taught me from the very first time that I visited 30 years ago that everything is alive. Everything has a purpose. And that's something that you can't really be just told. You have to see it to believe it. You have to feel it to believe it. You have to see it. And the first time I went to the Amazon 30 years ago, I walked the forest with many indigenous peoples. We called them guardabosques in that time because I was working at a rainforest reserve, the park guards. At that time, I thought I wanted to be an ethnobotanist. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to learn about the properties of the plants. I wanted to see how the people used the plants, whether it was for health and healing, for food, for medicine. And I was studying the plants, and the people there would talk about any plant that they would pass by. They knew what it was for. They knew the property. Either it was their families had shown them, they had learned from grandparents, from ancestors, or they just knew. And one time I said, "What is that? What's that one for?" He said, "That mushroom, doesn't it look like it's shaped like an ear?" I said, "What do you think it's for?" Earache? You squeeze this mushroom and you put it in your ear, and the little drop helps your ear infection. We may call this biomimicry, right? We have different words for it in our languages. But it was one of those moments where I said, wow, nature is so wise. Nature knows. And people who are close to nature know. And the animals that are close to nature know. They know what to eat, what not to eat. These are just some beautiful photos of some of the most majestic creatures that we work to protect. And this is another image of the sacred kapok tree with its buttress roots, giving it the foundation that it needs to be strong, to be that giant tree in the middle of the forest, to produce the water and the rain clouds that we need to sustain life. But this forest cannot exist and has never existed without people. The people are also what makes the Amazon and forests, tropical forests all over the world, what they are today. 80% of the biological diversity that we have on this Mother Earth is in indigenous peoples' lands. 80%. And that's why when Christiana says, we work to protect biodiversity and we work to protect climate, they are not separate. When we work to protect nature and the ecological systems on this planet, we are also working to protect people and the people who have protected nature for millennia. And that is the indigenous people. In the Amazon, there are over 500 distinct nationalities, over 80 uncontacted groups. These are people who have chosen to live in voluntary isolation. These are the Kayapo women. They're the warriors of the Xingu Basin that have stopped mega dams from being developed on their rivers. This is the Kayapo people that are the daughters of Cacique Hauni. You may have seen a photo or a video at some point over the last 30 years of Sting with this legendary warrior named Hauni. He has a giant lip plate. He is over 90 years old now. And his wish for all of his people is for them to get their land back. Every time we see Hauni, every time we see him speak, every time we see him in the media, he is saying, before I die, I want to ensure that our land is given back to our people. And just 2 weeks ago at ATL, which is the largest mobilization of indigenous peoples across Brazil, President Lula announced the demarcation of the Kayapo territories. Since Lula has been in power, there have been over 8 million hectares of land given back to indigenous peoples. This is not a small feat. It had been over 20 years since one hectare of land had been given back to indigenous peoples. So there is a long, long, long way to go. 100 million hectares to go. And this is what we will be working towards from now until the COP. There's the Conference on the Parties in Brazil in November. And the major demand of the movement of the indigenous people and the movement in Brazil and the global movement is for indigenous territories to be demarcated, to be titled, to be given back in stewardship, because indigenous peoples have been protecting and guarding this land for millennia. To defend the defenders, because they are the ones who are living in the forests, in the communities, and are on the front lines. They are the ones who are facing it off with illegal miners, with illegal loggers, with land grabbers, with oil companies, with people in their own communities who have decided that mining or oil development is a better way for now. One of the things that really gives me hope during this time, when we see so much division and destruction, one of the things that gives me hope is the power of women leadership. And the power of indigenous women's leadership right now is pure love and pure hope. And it's not easy, but it is very powerful. And it came out of resistance. It was not that long ago that Brazil was in a very similar situation to what we're going through right now in the United States. Their president was called the Trump of the tropics. And he was just determined to take away as many rights and as many lands and to roll back the Constitution. Does that sound familiar? And during that time, which was also during COVID, it was a very hard time. It was a very dark time. But during this time, the ancestral women warriors were coming together in their communities. They were coming together in their regions. And as soon as they were able, they started having assemblies and they started gathering. And they said, we're going to create a movement of ancestral women warriors called Amiga. For any of you who speak Spanish, amiga means friend. Amiga in Brazil is the movement of the ancestral women warriors, from the children to the jóvenes, to the youth, to the young women, to the older women, to the elders. And they have mobilized thousands of women to work for what they call the Bancada de Cocar, which is the headdress caucus. And what their goal is to get indigenous women in power from the local communities to the national government. And they have done that. From the darkest times, they have gotten Celia Chacriaba, the first indigenous woman to be in the federal Congress. They've gotten Sonia Guajajara, the first indigenous woman to be in the Ministry of Brazil. And she formed the first indigenous ministry of Brazil. They're indigenous women taking over their local nationalities. They're not just the vice president or the director of women's affairs. They are the presidents. And it's not easy, but they're doing it. And they are so inspiring to people, to indigenous people and indigenous women all over the Amazon, including the Quechua people of Sarayaku. This is our team in the Amazon. We're in the Quechua community of Sarayaku. This was just a few weeks ago. And it was my dream to bring our entire team to the Amazon. Many times, we're a California-based organization, and we've been very small for many years. And Most of the times when we've had our retreats, we've come out to here to Point Reyes or to Sonoma or to Southern California. And I said, the next time we have an all-staff retreat, it needs to be in the Amazon. And it's not going to be in a hotel, and it's not going to be in a lodge. It's going to be in community. And we did that. We were in community with one of the communities that we have worked with for over 25 years. The Quechua people of Sarayaku are just tremendous. They are exemplary of what it means to resist governments, corporations, financial institutions that had another plan for them. They had a plan to drill for oil on their land without their consent. And the Quechua people of Sarayaku said no. They said, no, we are not going to allow you to drill on our land in any way, shape, or form. And I remember the day I got the call from them in my office in Oakland. And they said, why are you only going after Chevron? I was like, because Chevron caused the destruction of the entire northern Ecuadorian Amazon. And we're working in response to the communities who are seeking justice, who have a lawsuit. And we're only 4 people. What can we can only do so much. He said, but the Quechua people of Sarayaku, we still have our forests. We still have our rivers. And this government has given this company from Argentina the right to come on our land. But our community says no. We said, well, we don't have any money. I said, we don't need your money. We need your solidarity. And we said, okay, how can we do that? And we said, we have a sat phone. We said, do you have an emergency plan? What are you going to do if the oil company comes onto your land with the military? We don't know. We have a sat phone. So we gave them a sat phone and a little mini DV camera. So this was in 2002, mini DV camera. We did a mini training. This is how you use this camera. Mini training. This is how you use this phone. Figure out who you're going to call first. Put together a phone tree so that we could all get called and respond. 2 months later, the military came in with the oil company, and they made the calls. And I will skip ahead and say they stopped oil drilling on their land. They sued their government. They won their case at the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, the first case ever to win against a government for a violation of free, prior, and informed consent. Major victory, historic victory for Indigenous peoples. Now there are at least 6 more cases, like the case of Sarayaku. And it's an emblematic case for human rights, for Indigenous rights. And it verifies the power of a positive and forceful no. It's okay, and it is just to say no. They have a right to say no. But they're not just saying no, going back to what we were saying before. They're saying yes to life. They're saying yes to protect our forests, yes to protect our way of life, yes to protect all the beings, our spiritual knowledge, what we've been taught by our ancestors. This is the hope, being with the women. This was on International Women's Day. I said, I got to get out of this country and be with the women in the streets in Ecuador. I'm going to just leave us with these words again as a reminder that during these darkest of dark times, we can't give up hope. We have to fight for justice, not just for ourselves and our communities, but for all communities. We must trust in the Indigenous knowledge and the Indigenous wisdom that has been here all along. We all have it. We all have it. We all have ancestors. We don't all come from here, right? Most of us are not from here. If you just go back to where your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents you'll find you have that ancestral wisdom as well, right? So we need to tap into that right now. And we'll remember where we're really from, and that it is all about love. So I'm going to end there and see if you all have any questions. And I just really thank you for listening. Thank you. The Amazon rainforest is massive, as I mentioned. It is about the size of the continental US. It encompasses 9 different countries. And within those 9 countries, there are different land management, land titling mechanisms, right? Forest management systems. In the Western Amazon in particular, there's titling of lands. In Ecuador, for example, in 1992, the indigenous movement, they rose up after many of their lands were taken. They rose up and literally forced the government to acknowledge ancestral territory. They basically presented the maps of their ancestral territories, where their peoples lived, traveled, what rivers, made their borders of their lands, and they gained ancestral territories, ancestral territorial recognition, which is massive. I mean, that would be like, redrawing the map of California from all the different hundreds of indigenous peoples here in California, state or federally recognized, and acknowledging them and saying, yep, this is your land. Even if there's other people on your land, this is your land. Now, what are we going to do about giving your land back? At that time, the government said, we will respect ancestral territory, but we still have the right to the subsurface land rights. So basically the minerals and the oil. And so that's what's continued to cause a lot of, conflict over land rights in Ecuador in particular. In Peru, you have to get individual title. It is much harder to get indigenous land recognized. It's a lot of legal bureaucracy within an ancestral territory that may be 1 million acres. They have to get title to each piece. So it's like a puzzle. In Brazil, it's very, very hopeful right now because the government is recognizing the demarcation of indigenous lands. Demarcation basically means recognition of ancestral lands and massive amounts of it. The challenge, I would say, of getting all indigenous land recognized in Brazil right now is the interests, the government interests. The biggest lobbies in Brazil are agribusiness and mining, and they want it. They want indigenous land. So, President Lula and the Lula administration have about 2 years left, and the indigenous peoples, in solidarity with many international partners, allies, funders, are working really, really hard to get as much land demarcated as possible. But it's everything from protesting in the streets, protesting in Brasilia, the capital, doing lawsuits, doing presentations to the Bureau of Land Management, FUNAI in this case in Brazil, going to cases at the Supreme Court. So a multitude of different strategies. And then also there's people who have invested millions of dollars buying land from cattle ranchers, buying land from colonists who have settled on their land. It's very interesting because a lot of what's happening in our country right now has happened in so many of the countries in the global south, in Abya Yala, and all across the Americas and around the world. So I think we can learn a lot of lessons from the resistance movements and the movements to protect the rights of nature, and indigenous rights, human rights, and specifically, I think we need to, I'm really glad you asked this question because I was trying to figure out how to weave this in without getting downer. We have to be, I think, really courageous and really creative at this time. The tactics and the strategies that we've been using haven't been working. We've been in silos. There's the environmental movement over here, the immigrant rights movement over here, the women's rights movement over here, the racial justice movement over here. We've been so siloed. We're in our lanes, and what's happening right now is force us to get out of our lanes and work together and figure out how we can work together. Who would have thought that park rangers would be organizing civil disobedience and protests? I mean, how many of you went to the parks protests about 2 months ago? I mean, I had a friend who is like serious mountain man, my friend from college, who has been a ranger and working in emergency response in Yosemite for decades. He called me crying, saying, "Sister, what can I do?" And I said, "Get your friends together and do what we used to do in college. Get out there in the streets. Talk to your supervisor." It's like, everybody's scared. Everyone's scared of losing their jobs. I'm like, "But you guys already lost your jobs. So what are you going to do?" And you know who it was? It was all the young park rangers, and many young park rangers of color, I have to say, that said, "We're going to get out there in the streets. We're going to organize, and we're going to organize." And a lot of the groups, or NGOs, said, "We're going to sue." And I think that's what we're going to do, right? We're going to organize in the streets. Let's fund those groups. Let's support them. Let's support the youth. Let's support the park rangers. Let's support the organizations that are filing the lawsuits. And I do have to say that some of us, I would be lying if I said I didn't have a little bit of fear right now about what's coming this week. And in case you haven't heard, there are some executive orders that are going to be given to us on Earth Day. We thought one was going to come yesterday. And one of the executive orders basically says we're going to freeze international funds from coming into US-based NGOs and coming out of US-based NGOs to the international community. So basically stop international funding to our organizations and out to the organizations we support. So Amazon Watch doesn't receive USAID funding. So we weren't too worried about USAID, how it would impact our work, but it definitely has an impact on the communities we work with. And if Amazon Watch, just a little example, Amazon Watch, which we grant between $500,000 and $1 million a year in solidarity grants to communities protecting the forests and protecting their rights, if we can't get those funds to people, they can't protect their forests. So we're going to have to get really creative. Really creative. And they're also threatening to revoke NGO status on Earth Day for any organization that works on climate. So we're going to need a lot of support. We're going to need to be coming together a lot more. I mean, we're such a threat, right? We're working to protect our Mother Earth, our ecological systems, our future life on this planet. So, that's scary. Let's just acknowledge that's pretty scary, but we're not going to fall into the paranoia and the fear. We're going to say, you know what? Let's talk to our friends in other countries and see where we can move our money. Let's talk to our funders and see if they would still support us if they didn't get a tax write-off. Would you still support us if you didn't get that tax write-off? That's what it's going to come to. Is it okay if you don't get that tax write-off this year? Because otherwise we will not be able to do our work. So we need your support, but we all are the support, right? We all are the support. So remember, it's all about love. Thank you.